Gardeners are often told that compost is the ultimate solution to soil problems. Pile it high, spread it wide, and worms will magically return, they say. But anyone who has ever dumped wheelbarrows of compost onto a bed only to find it still lifeless knows the disappointment. Worms don't always come back just because compost is present, and this is the myth too many gardeners believe. Compost is powerful, yes, but piling alone doesn't guarantee the revival of worm life. To truly understand why, we need to dig deeper into how worms live, what they eat, and the hidden conditions that make them thrive or disappear. If a gardener piles compost onto dry, compacted, or depleted soil, expecting worms to arrive overnight, they will be disappointed. Worms are living creatures with specific needs. They do not simply show up because organic matter is available on the surface. They need shelter, moisture, temperature balance, and a food supply that suits their biology. Compost provides part of this, but not all of it. The result is that gardeners who focus only on adding compost often mistake surface improvement for deeper soil revival. Worms are nature's engineers, but they require an invitation, one crafted through the right soil environment. To bring them back, compost must be more than a pile. It must be integrated into a system that worms find irresistible. To understand the myth, it helps to know why worms disappear. Worms abandon soil when conditions turn hostile. Extreme dryness, chemical residues, compaction, and lack of food diversity push them away. If a garden bed has been stripped of organic material or treated with synthetic fertilizers for years, worms may vanish entirely. Even if compost is added later, the underlying conditions may still be inhospitable. So, think of it this way. A house isn't a home without, air, water, and food. Compost alone is kind of like building a structure without plumbing or heating. Sure, it looks right, but it doesn't really sustain life inside. Worms need a balanced home, not just an invitation. Worms eat in a way that, honestly, a lot of gardeners overlook. They don't consume finished compost so much as the in-between materials, the half-rotted leaves, the softened stems, the decaying roots, and all those microbe-rich fragments that are still undergoing transformation. Compost that's fully mature is already stable, which means basically most of the rapid microbial feast is over. Worms will pass through it, but it just doesn't hold them the way unfinished, dynamic organic matter does. And this is exactly why piling finished compost on top of soil often results in worms grazing lightly, then moving on. What worms really crave is a living buffet of partially decomposed matter, rich in microbial life, buried where they can find moisture and cover. Without this, the pile just stays static, and the worms never truly establish themselves. Moisture is another overlooked key. Worms breathe through their skin, which must stay moist. Dry compost, especially if left exposed on top of a bed, is a desert for them. Even if conditions are better below, the exposed surface discourages worm activity at the entry point. This is why mulching over compost can dramatically change results. A thick layer of leaves, straw, or cardboard above the compost protects moisture and gives worms the shaded, damp environment they love. Without this, the pile sits as lifeless matter, decomposing slowly but not attracting the underground workforce it was meant to support. The truth is that compost does play an essential role in worm revival, but only when paired with the other ingredients worms demand. Compost provides microbes, structure, and a baseline of organic matter. But to turn it from static material into a worm magnet, it must be combined with living soil practices. Mixing compost into the root zone, layering it with softer green matter, and covering it with mulch creates the varied textures and food stages worms seek. Worms are drawn to gradients, not uniformity. A bed with compost, half-rotten organic scraps, and protective mulch becomes a living ecosystem that calls worms home. By contrast, a simple pile of finished compost on hard ground is only a one-dimensional offering. One of the dangers of the compost myth is that gardeners, often assume a bed is healthy simply because it is covered in compost. Plants may grow for a while, drawing from the immediate fertility, but without worms to cycle and aerate, the soil underneath just stays compacted and stagnant. Over time, nutrients wash away, the structure collapses, and honestly, the soil does not regenerate. This is why some gardens become dependent on constant compost additions, because the natural system of worms and microbes never really reestablishes. Compost becomes a crutch instead of a catalyst. When worms do return, everything changes. Their burrowing breaks compaction, which allows roots to push deeper. Their castings enrich the soil with sticky, microbe-rich aggregates that actually hold nutrients against leaching. Their tunnels improve water infiltration and create microclimates that, shelter beneficial microbes. In short, worms transform compost into living soil in a way that compost alone simply cannot achieve. This is why relying on piling compost is a myth. Worms are the missing link that turns matter into fertility. So, to really bring worms back, gardeners have to think beyond just piling stuff on the soil. They need to create conditions that, mimic the natural forest floor. That means blending compost with unfinished organic matter, burying small pockets of soft food like fruit scraps or even soaked cardboard, and always keeping the soil covered to help maintain moisture. It also means steering clear of harsh chemicals and avoiding tilling, since those things can destroy the worm tunnels. When these practices are combined, compost becomes more than a pile. It becomes the base of a living habitat, enriched by worm activity that keeps it fertile season after season. The key is integration, not addition. The deeper lesson in this myth is that compost should not be treated as the final answer, but as the starting point. Compost provides food and structure, but worms provide the engine of renewal. Without them, the cycle stalls and fertility depends entirely on constant outside input. With them, the cycle completes and soil becomes self-sustaining. This is why the most fertile gardens are not the ones with the biggest compost piles, but the ones alive with worm tunnels just beneath the surface. Compost is vital, but only when it is part of a whole system that living creatures can thrive in. The compost myth, that piling is enough to bring worms back, misleads too many gardeners into shallow practices. Compost is powerful, but it is not a magic key on its own. Worms return only when moisture, food diversity, cover, and soil biology are present together. Once these conditions are restored, worms transform compost into something far greater, a living, breathing soil that renews itself from within. If this guide opened your eyes to the deeper truth about compost and worms, make sure you subscribe to Botanical Bliss for more insights into natural gardening. Share this video with fellow gardeners who rely only on compost piles, and help them discover that worms are not passive beneficiaries, but the real architects of fertile soil.